Okay,
I haven't
point
heard
taken.
one good
Point
reason for
taken.
why council members are choosing to go in person to a meeting when we can do this virtually.
Point taken. Paul, would you like to get us started, please?
Kath, do you want me to?
I am waiting for an answer.
Okay.
I don't want a point taken. I would like to know why council members are
We're
in
here
chambers.
for a budget session, Liz, okay?
Hey, Jim, the budget, we are in a budget crisis in part because of COVID. Let's make that clear. We are in a budget crisis in part because of COVID.
So Paul, if you would begin.
Okay, and Kath, do you want me to start or did you?
I just want to say thank you everyone for coming on today and for your interest in the budget session of Erie, Pennsylvania. Thank you to Mayor Joe and his team. And today we are working with Chris Moore and revenue and expenditures, and risk management. Thank you. You may begin.
Okay, again, to follow up on Kathy, thanks everybody for coming. I'm upstairs. Please don't come up because it's freezing up here too. But the first thing, I think we're gonna start with Chris to give his overview on risk management, but I'd like to talk about a couple things first, and some of the numbers as we go through the departments over the next couple days. The one line item, the biggest line item we always have in the risk management fund is our group insurance number. And on page 89 of your handout book, you're going to see the chart we always give you to kind of figure out where the group number comes from. And so this year we're planning on spending about a little over $14 million in health insurance expenses for all of our employees. And that comes from the last couple years historical numbers. Both Highmark and UPMC put together some calculations to figure out what they think our spending is going to be, add what they think is the percentage of increase in that world, which I don't want to cut into what Chris is going to talk about. But then we divide it by the FTEs, assuming everybody in the group is going to take their insurance, and we put that into everybody's budget based on the FTEs in the budget. The same thing with comp line item 4020. We do the same thing where we figure out what our comp spending's been the last few years. We talk to our broker about what they're expecting to spend in comp or what they're expecting us to spend in comp over the next year. And then we divide that out by the number of FTEs in each department also. So as we go through those budgetary departments, that's where you're going to see your group and your workers' comp. And then each department is then charged an amount for, their proportion to where the spending is going to be. And the enterprise funds, sewer, refuse, and golf are all charged a percentage of that amount also. So from there, I'm going to let Chris take it away. And then after he's done, we'll talk about some revenue stuff.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Council. If you don't mind, I think we'll go ahead and start on page 80 of the Council handout book. We'll just go through a couple charts and graphs there, so it give you guys a visual as opposed to just looking at raw numbers the whole time. Page 80 is an overview of our workers' comp experience. Pretty self-explanatory. You can see the left side looks at total claims by year along with the dollar amount incurred. And on the right side, we're looking at lost time claims and the percent of closed claims. So if you look at our frequency is on a nice trend. This year, we're at 112 claims year to date. We're averaging about 12 claims a month. So we're on pace for about 144 claims this year, which is a nice number. It continues to trend down. The current 4-year trend is 18% lower than the previous 4-year trend. So definitely some good news there. The right side, we had 3 lost time claims when this chart was created. That's up to 4 as we speak right now. Again, so another good year there as well. And we have almost over 75% of our claims have been closed already this year. If you go to page 81, this just gives you an overview of some of the risk control services that we've conducted this year. It has been a little different, a little more difficult this year with COVID, but we were able to conduct some important trainings this year, that being confined space, lockout, tag out, and fall prevention. We were able to conduct those virtually. We focused on employees who had not been trained yet. So we were able to keep the total number of employees involved in those trainings to a smaller number, in which they were able to, socially distance and participate in the training. Even our annual bureau walkthroughs that we do at each department, we were able to do those virtually as well. We sent a checklist to each department head prior to their walkthrough. So they were able to go through their buildings, complete the checklist, and then we were able to have a discussion via Zoom to address any concerns they might have. Again, not ideal, not as good as, getting boots on the ground and being there and seeing things in person, but we made the best of the situation. We are going to be addressing a major safety issue by purchasing an attenuator. This is going to allow us to do make some progress in the work zone area. As of now, we've had to do some somewhat unsafe things, just thinking about picking up cones in the street. This will help put a barrier between our employees and vehicles while they're doing that. It'll also help with painting lines, patching potholes, and even closing down streets. We had an incident this year where we had a road closed with all the proper signage, and we still had a citizen decide to drive through that road closure and actually hit one of our employees. Luckily that it wasn't, they weren't seriously injured, but having something like this will hopefully help avoid that type of situation in the future. The next page, 82, just gives you a nice visual and looks at our average cost per claim for workers' comp. This is put together by our stop loss insurance company, Midwest. And I like to use this because it gives us a best practice and a benchmark that we can kind of compare ourselves to. They use their book of business for like-sized cities and municipalities to compare us. So we're comparing apples to apples. And as you can see, other than 2011, which is the only year we've had a stop loss workers' comp claim, we've been doing a pretty good job in this respect. And as you can see, since 18, we're going back on a nice downward trend there. But continually, year in and year out, we're not only outperforming the benchmark, but we're outperforming the best practice, which is an even higher standard there. The next page, page 83, takes a look at heart and lung payments. Again, this has nothing to do with the heart or the lung. It's just the name of the act that was created, which basically says when a police officer or a firefighter is temporarily totally disabled, they receive full pay, full salary, no taxes taken out while they're out, for a work-related injury. So this chart just gives you an idea of what we've spent specifically on heart and lung payments since 2011. As you can see, fire is having a very good year in this respect. And police is as well overall. Actually, a big chunk of the money for heart and lung payments for police this year is related to one claim which occurred during the riot on May 30th. So other than
Can you
that,
explain what the COVID-related payments are there for police, the $12,702 related to COVID?
yes, there, once COVID happened, back in April, the state decided to pass a new act, which basically said that first responders who, and it's a little gray, the language isn't exactly clear, and there isn't a lot of case law yet, obviously, on this type of stuff. So it's kind of open to interpretation, but they're essentially saying any first responders who are diagnosed with COVID due to a work-related exposure should receive, so if they're exposed to it and have to miss work because of it, being quarantined, they should receive not workers' comp payments, but heart and lung payments for that. So we have had a few first responders or police officers, I believe in this case, who we have been able to verify they were absolutely exposed to a positive case while on the job. And so we have paid them heart and lung for the time off.
So, and how different would that be than the amount for, even though you said it's state law, they didn't actually get COVID, but they had been exposed to it. Is that correct?
Yeah, you don't have to contract COVID. It's just if you were 100% for sure exposed to someone on the job and you had to be quarantined, or you weren't able to work, then you would qualify for these heart and lung payments.
Okay, and so are the heart and lung payments more than what they would have gotten under workers' comp? Is that?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So heart and lung, like I said, heart and lung payments are look at your paycheck and what you would see before taxes are taken out. That's what police and fire are paid under heart and lung. Whereas with workers' comp, you're actually only reimbursed 66 2/3 of your normal income.
Okay, so are they getting this in addition to their pay though, or is this substituting for their pay when they're quarantined?
No, it's just substituting.
Okay.
And again, that is a state law. So, yeah, that gives you an idea of how we've done over the years in terms of those payments. Page 84 just talks about the fact that, as of now in the state of Pennsylvania, the city of Erie and other municipalities, we don't technically fall under OSHA at this time. But the state does have strict self-insured requirements that you have to meet in order to become a self-insured. And so this gives you a little breakdown in terms of what you need to do to reach that self-insured status. There has been a bill, I think Harkins, if I'm not mistaken, is the one who originally wrote the bill or sponsored the bill when there was that EMTA fatality a few years ago. And to my knowledge, I don't think it's ever come out of committee, but the bill would place municipalities under OSHA. So I'm assuming that day will come eventually, but as of now, we're not there yet. Page 85 talks about property casualty market that we've seen this year. In the world of insurance, there's soft markets and hard markets. Soft markets being when prices are low, and hard when prices are high. And unfortunately, we are in the midst of a very hard market. We're expecting substantial increases this year. As you can see, based on the Council of Insurance Agents and Brokers, their Q2 survey showed large size accounts were hit hardest with average increases of 14%. Commercial auto, once again, saw a large increase of almost 10%. And property's been going up year after year, and that hasn't changed in quarter two. As you can see, there was a 13% increase in premiums. The two hardest hit were the umbrella and the D&O, or directors and officers, lines of coverage. Umbrella saw a 20% increase, and the D&O saw almost a 17% increase. And as you can see, this is the first time we've seen a 20% increase or higher in terms of umbrella coverage since 9/11. Obviously, the recent catastrophes this year in 2020 have been a large contributor to these increases. Those would obviously include COVID-19, the wildfires out west, the protests and riots, the civil unrest, and the hurricanes have all had a substantial impact on the insurance market. I would expect our increases to be in line with this, or even maybe somewhat higher, due to our increased exposures to some of these line items, being a city. So just something to keep in mind. We are looking at some substantial increases this year for our insurance premiums. Page 86 just gives you an idea of our insurance program, the coverages we have, the limits. It also breaks down our deductibles that we currently have in place. And then on the far right, you can see those are the premiums we paid for 2020. I do not have any solid estimates yet for our insurance for 2021. We should be getting those soon. But that gives you an idea of what we paid this year. The last line item there refers to our workers' comp stop loss, which that comes into effect if for police and fire, if a claim reaches $650,000, then the stop loss insurance carrier would step in and start to pay the claim. And for all other employees, that number is $500,000. And as I said earlier, we've only had one of those claims, and that was in 2011. So to my knowledge, other than that year, it's been a long time since, knock on wood, since we've reached that level of insurance. And actually, due to our good performance in workers' comp, our rates for that insurance haven't changed in years, but the premium does increase due to the fact that payroll increases each year. So. Page 87 just goes over some, the first chart there looks at a diabetes prevention program that I've been working with UPMC with. They're going to implement that at the start of the year. They asked for our feedback in terms of ways to get people engaged in the program. So like I said, they're hoping to roll that out beginning of the year, and hopefully we can get as many of our employees who are either, on the onset of diabetes or in the midst of it now. Hopefully we can get them involved, get them engaged, and help them manage that disease. The second graph there just gives you an idea of the employee contributions for 2020. If you recall, we still have two plans, one with Highmark and one with UPMC. And there shows you the contributions for each of those plans. The last chart gives you a breakdown of the health cost by bargaining unit, 2016 to 2019. So you can go right across the board there for each unit. It gives you the total that we spent on claims for that bargaining unit, along with the employee contributions received in that year. And so you can see there, early retiree police and early retiree fire, they still do not pay any contribution for their health insurance. And that gives you a breakdown of what we spent on each of those bargaining units. Chart, page 88 just looks at, I get these numbers from the Kaiser Foundation, again, as a way to kind of measure ourselves. You can see there's a fully insured line there, along with the self-insured, and then the city of Erie as an average. And so again, this is the spend for for a fully insured family, the average premium, a self-insured family, and then the city of Erie's average. just again, as a way to kind of measure ourselves and see where we stand, see what kind of progress we're making. I guess this is a good time to talk about, we've had a phenomenal year health insurance wise. We're on pace for $7.9 million in claims this year. We were at 9.5 million last year. From conversations I've had with our broker and with both health insurance carriers, it does seem like COVID has had an impact on this, at least up until June, you know, when elective surgeries and things were shut down. It seems like June up to this point, things kind of went back to normal. Even with that, you know, even since June, our spend has been lower than normal. So I think it's fair to say, you know, COVID had an impact, but I don't think that's the be and end all in terms of why we had a good year. But some good news, we are on pace for a very good year health insurance wise. We haven't been, if we finish under $8 million, that'll be the first time, and I think since 2016 or 17. So that's very good news there. Page 89, Paul's already kind of walked you through this one, just shows you the funding, how we fund line item 4018, the group line item there with employee contributions, and also taking money from the different departments throughout the city. And that's about it. The rest, page 90, 91, this just gives you maybe some light reading material for you later, just gives you a little FAQ on risk management. So with that, if anyone has any other questions, it kind of wraps up my spiel.
Chris, in terms of, we see the numbers for the early retirees that don't have to make a contribution, the amount, but how many employees approximately are covered by that? And what, do you know?
Rough off the top of my head, I want to say 40 to 50.
Okay.
And then you also have to remember too, with this, the dependents also are on the coverage as well, as long as they don't have access to other health insurance. But we technically, like if an employee passes away, the wife would still continue on this coverage as well.
Okay, and that's like forever?
No.
I mean, that's future early retirees also are entitled to this, is that right?
Yes, there's been no change there. All our retirees are still eligible for this. The only time they come off is when they reach 65, if they become Medicare eligible, or if they get a job somewhere that offers health insurance to them, they are required to take that health insurance. But so, yeah, we have a lot of, they retire at 50, 55, and, they're on the health insurance.
Once again, it's all contractual, right, Chris?
I understand it's contractual, Jim, but nice work, or I should say nice retirement if you can get it. I know the county used to offer, that type of coverage. I don't think it does anymore. Has there ever been an attempt to rein that in? Does anybody know? If you're retiring at 50 and you aren't Medicare eligible, you can get Social Security at 62. You are not Medicare eligible till 65. That's a long time. Have we ever looked at a lump sum of how much that is costing us?
Once again, I believe
Anybody?
that's still contractual. I think
Jim,
that's,
I understand that. I'm asking if we are looking at it for the future.
Liz, that's
in
all.
negotiations.
Can I speak to that, Jim?
Pardon me?
Sure.
Yeah, that's all. Those were all, as Jim is mentioning the fact that it's contractual, those were all contractually given. Those two benefits were given contractually to the fire and police unions by state mandated Act 111 arbitration rulings. So you would have to go to an arbitrator and ask for that benefit to be taken away from them.
And no one has ever suggested that. Am I the only one who's out on a limb saying, why are we doing this? I'm asking, has anybody on council ever asked about this before? I assume that we've had some people looking at the budget in the past who have said, why?
I think a multitude of people have asked about this over the last 15 years I've been here. And again, what I'm, this is state mandated. Along with the pension that the fire and police get, those are state mandated.
Well, I think at some point we're going to have to say, I don't care if it's state mandated. Cities cannot continue to have those kinds of obligations. I hope that there are a lot of citizens out there watching this right now who might have been laid off from their jobs, who might know that they cannot get Medicare until age 65, and that no one's coming in and paying their health insurance with no contribution for possibly up to 15 years.
Anything else, Chris?
No, I'm good.
Jim, Kathy, do you want me to jump into revenues then?
Certainly.
Okay, let's go to page 16 in the budget book, not the handout book, but the budget book. And then I'll reference, as we go through these things, I'll reference some pages where you can look these things up if at your leisure to see where we came up with some of these numbers. The first section is the taxes. And taxes is comprised of your real estate taxes, income taxes, realty transfer taxes, parking tax, and amusement tax. The real estate taxes, if you want to look at the page 14 and 15 of the handout book, it shows what the most recent assessment data is from the county, which we got from the July assessment, the July abstract, where they worked on that for the latest school district taxes. We'll get ours sometime the end of this month, so we'll know exactly what the number will be, but the July number usually doesn't change too much. So the real estate taxes current number, the very first line item, we take the assessment and times it by the millage rate, and then times it by the collection percentage, which the last few years has been just a hair under 90%. So whatever the tax bills go out at, we collect about 90% of that each year. The prior, which is line 3102, and then the penalties and interest to go along with 3191. We put a new chart into the handout book on page 20, which shows what the collections of these delinquents are each year. But each year, the 10% that is turned over to the county for delinquent tax collections, we normally collect in the neighborhood of about, between interest, penalty, and principals, $3.3 million. So we took the history on that and budgeted that accordingly for this year. The income,
Paul,
yes,
has our current tax collections, are we still in the right neighborhood of average compared to years prior, even though we have the COVID this year?
Yes, real estate tax collections are trending just a very small hair ahead of where they've been in the past compared to the original assessment, which is a good thing. Now, our income taxes, which I'll talk about in a second, are lagging behind, but the real estate taxes are actually ahead of where they have been in the past. I mean, the difference between 99.5% and 99.3% is not a large percentage, but in the situation we're in, it's good that we're actually ahead. Now we'll have to see as we get into the end of November and all of December if it ends up that way because of the history we've had of what collections have been. But right now it's pointing in a good direction.
Hey, Paul, if you could digress for the benefit of the people, where it talked about the interest and penalties that we usually get are about $3 million. And maybe explain, the tax sale, the tax lien sale that we're not having. That number is basically, we took a payday loan on that amount of money last year at the end of the year, in order to, we were going to, rather, we had budgeted one of those.
Correct.
And so that people understand, that if you could.
Okay, well, I think you hit, you hit all the high points there. As I said, normally in a given year, we only collect 90% of the original assessed value of the taxes. So we turn over to the county, who's the collecting agent after the first year. As our city treasurer, Kaz, collects all taxes the first year that they're issued. Once that first year ends, we turn them over to the county, and the county does the collecting. And in any given year, there's probably, at the beginning of any given year, $5.5 to $6 million of delinquents between what was not paid in a given year, and then what was not paid in the historical 2, 3, 4 years behind that. So the idea of these tax lien sales is we take the balance, the total balance that's due, and we sell them out just as a retail company would sell their accounts receivable, or a manufacturing company would sell their accounts receivable to a factor. We'd say to, we'd send out an RFP, and multiple companies would respond, and we'd say, hey, we have $6 million in accounts receivable. What would you pay us for that amount of money? Somebody will come back, and it's normally in the neighborhood of 85 to 90%. And the reason we did that last year is we were going to be short in the budget, and it is a stopgap situation where you can get a couple $1 million by selling those delinquent taxes. And as Michael, as you and I talked about the one day a couple weeks back, the negative to this is that you're going to give up in the neighborhood of 15% of those delinquent tax liens right off the top to the factoring company. And if you go to that chart I put in the book, I think it's on page 21, you'll see that, page 20 actually, sorry, you'll see that within 3 years, we normally collect about 99% of all delinquent taxes within those first 3 years. Because I think the tax lien sale is totally different than the sale of somebody's property if they haven't paid their taxes within 3 years. And I think that's where people get messed up by that whole thing. But as we all know, and I don't know, I don't see Ed on my screen, but Ed asked about the fact that right now the county has set their rule that if you don't pay your taxes, your real estate taxes within 3 years, your house can go up for a tax sale. Well, we know that I don't want to lose my house. So even if I'm behind, I'm going to go to the 3rd year. Once that 3rd year comes, I'm going to pay my taxes. So it's two different situations. The lien sale is a sale of accounts receivable factoring, and the delinquent sale is actually selling houses where somebody or some business or some entity has not paid their real estate taxes within that 3-year period.
Paul, Ed Brzezinski.
Yes.
Can you hear me? My question since last April was, who has the power to change that 3 years to 2 years?
That's a county issue.
Okay, so can we work with the county? You realize that we could get a year of taxes from some of these
You're muted.
multiple landowners?
You're muted.
Yes, that you're absolutely correct there, Ed. Yes. If
That's
that
what I'm
law,
trying
if that law was changed, yes,
That would have to be done through the county.
correct. And then
All right, so
we'd have to follow suit with their change.
we need to move with that. There's, nobody doing anything wrong. We multiple landowners know how to play the game. They know they have 3 years. So if you see they're behind, they're 2.5 years behind taxes because they don't worry about the sale until the 3rd year. If we could make it a 2-year, I get a feeling we get a lot of 1-year taxes these folks sitting on. I'm talking about guys that own 6, 12, and more properties in the city. They're the ones taking advantage of our single payers. That's all I have to say. But Ed over at the Treasurer's office is making a list for us now of the multiple landowners who are always in their arrears. We have to go to the county. I'll talk to Carl and see if we can get something going that way. But there's a lot of money sitting there that we need. Thank you.
Yeah, you're yes, absolutely correct.
Ed, when are you going to get that list?
I talked to Ed Williams today, and he said he'd have it to Lori probably by tomorrow.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you'll get it to all of us?
I'll tell Lori to make sure she does.
Okay,
Yeah.
the reason I'm glad that you had brought this up before, because today at the land bank meeting, there was an offer to buy a property and the offerer was a year behind on taxes, I think owed $2,200. And so they looked through it and they said, oh, well, this is a history of how this person, waits a year to pay taxes. And but Chris Groner's on the land bank board now, and he is going to be pressing for some more precise guidelines there. So I was glad that you had brought that to our attention. I think we're all aware of it when we see the legal ads in the paper, and we can go through there and see the same names over and over again that managed to have created this situation. So thanks, Ed. But let us know when you get that information, okay?
Yeah, they haven't created that situation. We have down the line. They know how to play the game. They have 3 years to play. And I didn't like it back in 1988 when they were doing it, and I still don't like it. So I think we're going to take a couple steps more forward and do something about it. We need the money, it's simple as that.
Okay, the next batch of revenues in that taxes are income taxes, special levy 4148, non-resident, or I'm sorry, 3148, non-resident 3150, income taxes 3151, and our local service tax 3183. What we did there was we took the historical increase each year of about 1.15% in people's wages, divided it by the unemployment rate for the last 5 years, not including 2020, 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, which was about 96.3%. And we multiplied it out by what the Congressional Budget Office is saying the unemployment rate's going to be next year, which is about 91.6%. So we said we're not going to, as this year we're a little behind in collecting our special levy and our income taxes and the like. We made the assumption for next year we're going to be a little bit behind in those same things based on what Congressional Budget Office is saying. So that's where you're getting the 18,800,000 and the 7 million, and the LST's down a little bit too, where we always collect 2,250,000. We're saying that's going to be about $100,000 down. The last thing, the parking tax revenue and the amusement tax. Parking tax, as we keep track of that, we normally in a given year collect about $250,000 or so there. You can see that we budgeted in 2020, $755,000. We went through who's open, who's not, and took about a 40% deduction there. to get down to that $650,000 mark. And same with the amusement tax. We looked at what's been going on the last 4 to 6 months of this year, made the assumption that's probably going to happen the beginning of next year and the end of next year. And we came up with the best estimate at about $100,000 of collections there.
Hey, Paul, do you know, where did we actually get amusement tax from this year? Do you know? I mean,
I don't have that in front of me, but I can get you a copy of the list.
okay, because I guess, I mean, the auditors would have been playing.
At the beginning of the year, yes.
Yeah. Okay, I was just trying to figure out.
Amusement tax collections, I mean, I don't want to digress and hold everybody up, but we've actually collected, the third quarter, we collected $20,000. So even at the height of COVID in April, May, and June, there were still events going on. We collected $19,993 in the third quarter of this year. So there were events going on. People were paying us. The next grouping is our licenses and permits. And if you want to, those numbers, we just used historical based on what everybody, what we've collected in the past. We talked to Andy Zimmerman, if you're looking at line 3216, our building permits, on what he is hearing from the contractors on what should happen next year. But you can reference page 24 in the budget handout book to see where the historical collections are, the historical uses are, and that's where we came up with those numbers.
Paul, don't you think with the LERTA, that should have bumped up a little bit?
Jim, it absolutely could. We were trying to be conservative with that number because we thought with the LERTA this year, you'll see that we budgeted $1 million this year. And with the slow start and with the problem everybody had in April, when the governor shut the everything down March 16th or so, and we didn't really open up till May, the first week in May. Jim, we were just trying to be conservative with that number.
That's fine. Thank you.
Paul, how are the rental licenses doing though?
As you see, that's line 3223. Right now, we're a hair behind in our collections, 10% or so.
And is that going to be, I mean, is there an attempt to get those licenses?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Before the end of the year, or what's this? I mean, is that going to be made up, or is that?
They get their second and third notices. We know who the people are that have these properties. So eventually we will collect that money. Yes.
Paul, do we keep track if they also may be owing garbage fees or sewer fees? How delinquent are some of these landlords? I guess what I'm asking. They're not licenses.
There are some people that are 1 year, 2 years, 3 years delinquent, but their fee keeps going up. We've always tried to see if we could tie that into rental licenses versus the other fees. And I don't think that was feasible.
Okay.
Next line item, the franchise revenue, cable TV. We base that on what the latest amount being charged at your cable bill. And then we look at how many people have cable. And we just actually got a check today that Lisa showed me where we're going to hit our $1 million mark again this year in that amount.
Good.
The grants, all of those line items in the grant accounts, we use our historical collections based on what we should get, what we don't get, how these things move up and down. The PennDOT grill and all of these things. I know everybody's had a chance to look at their handout book. If you really want to know what each grant is, those are defined in the budget handout book on pages 6 through about 12. The pilot list, we put the pilot list in the book. The list is on page 16. And also, again, we put the tax exempt list in the budget handout book on page 18, where you can see what tax exempts that own large blocks of property in the city are paying taxes or paying a pilot agreement. As we always talk about that one, that's a good page to reference. Our service fees, the next grouping are zoning, towing, safety reports. Those are kind of those are variable revenues. So with those, we used historical collections on those things. The next batch of revenues is our traffic fines, our parking fines, state police fines, traffic court fines, the parking and traffic court cost, which is actually what is called, our boot fee is called that, and then the district justice fines. The last four, state police, traffic, parking, district justice, we used historical numbers on what had been collected the last 3 years. And going forward, what we assumed. The parking fines, as everybody knows, we have a new company collecting our delinquents, which I thought would be maybe a good study session in January or so for us to put together a good a report on how this went during the 2020 year with COVID and the late start to actually the delinquent phone calls. But as Lisa told me today, we've been getting money with the collection agency. So moving forward, that I think council made a good decision in moving, when you instituted that contract and we hired the company to do those collections. But look forward. I mean, Kathy, if at a finance committee meeting next year, if you'd like, right at the beginning of the year or after the first of the year, we can have a study session, or first finance or second finance committee meeting, we can talk about how that went this year and give you a full report on that.
Hey, Paul.
Paul, I have a question. We spent a lot of time talking
You're
about
muted.
the Bayfront Parkway.
Yes.
And who does enforcement on the Bayfront Parkway? And do we know do the city police do that? And
That's
do we
a
know?
state road.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
That's a state road. I guess that's a good question to ask Dan on Wednesday night, Chief Pizzarni. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know that our crew goes down there and patrols. I don't know. I'm not going to even answer. Dan would be the one to answer that question.
Okay.
And then Ed, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted now. I just wanted to go back one again.
Okay.
The situation we're in, I'm looking for money. What's the chances that we just levy, say, a 10% usage fee, to call, for want of calling it something else, on all nonprofits who don't have a pilot program with us? It wouldn't amount to that much, but if nothing else, it might stop garbage and sewer fees in excess.
Ed, I'm going to say I don't know if we can do that. I will check with Solicitor Betza tomorrow to ask him if we can. I know there are rules and laws in the Pennsylvania Revenue Manual with regard to that stuff. I don't want to speak to that. I'll ask Ed.
Okay, I'd like to find that out.
Yeah, I mean, so what you're proposing is, and I don't want to pick on any nonprofit specifically, so I'm going to say Paul's nonprofit, they're not paying us a pilot. Send Paul's nonprofit a bill for 10% of the value, or 10% of the value of their real estate.
Of their taxes. 10%.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Or yeah, I'm sorry. Not 10% of the value of the real estate.
The usage fee is a reality. All these nonprofits actually became because the city was Big Daddy. We had all the money because we had 12th Street filled with manufacturing companies, both ways, GE, Hammer Mill. all that American meter, it was all there. Now, we're not the big guy anymore. We can't afford to sit back and pretend we are. Because the only people getting hurt are the people who work really hard to pay their taxes here. It's not fair to them if we don't look at every avenue that we can. I don't think there's a nonprofit that would go broke for $250 or whatever it might be. That could bring in a mill maybe. Again, just a thought outside the box.
Okay.
Hi.
Yes.
You have the tax exempt property page. The hospitals I know have been expanding. Are these accurate as of 2020, or are they like from before they started expanding?
These are the most recent assessment numbers from
Okay.
back in July. So yeah, as the mayor speaks each week at the press conference about the LERTAs, both of those have big building projects coming up. So sometime in the I don't want to say sometime in the future, those pilot numbers will change.
Thank you.
Okay. The next grouping is our miscellaneous, which is our checking account interest and bank interest, that type of thing. Our rents on the cell phone tower, special assessments, which is, there's still a couple, 2-3 bars and restaurants that have those direct under the bar
Alarms?
alarms. Yeah, sorry. Alarms that go straight to the police department. And then contributions that we receive from the general fund. The largest is always the housing authority comes in every year and gives us a check, which is not a pilot agreement, but they always give us an amount equal to roughly what their pilot would be. So that's what that big contribution number is there. And they always tell us to use it in the general fund for like more police protection or fire or anything along those lines. The next grouping is our reimbursements, our CDBG, which you can look at page 26 to see where that amount comes from. The solicitor for all the work he does for the sewer authority, crossing guards from the school district, you know, $30,000 is about half a year. We're hoping they open back up next fall. O&E, the pension board reimburses the city or city general fund for the use of the pension board. The housing authority reimbursement, which you as council approved a couple months back. So that agreement's in place for the next couple years. Central service reimbursement, which is the reimbursement from the sewer fund and the refuse fund for the use of, you know, the department I work in and all the city services that payroll and bill paying and solicitor's office, the clerk's office, everything that goes along with the expenses that neither the sewer nor the refuse department has. And then we get a small $20,000 or so post-retirement reimbursement every year for helping with retirees that are on pension. The next grouping is miscellaneous sources. And it should actually, years ago, they started the word miscellaneous, but it kind of should be miscellaneous payroll sources, because most of the money that comes back in there is money that we're paying out on behalf of employees that have quattros or employees that have support agreements that we're paying out of their paychecks that we get back at the end of the year. Sale of general fixed assets. Normally at the end of the year, we sell old police cars out at the auto auction, or sell the, AJ was going to take out some of the old motorcycles, and we just haven't done it yet this year. The last line item or grouping of line items are operating transfers, the sewer revenue fund. If the sewer revenue fund makes a profit, we will take the $1.1 million as a transfer. And the sewer revenue transfer and the refuse and recycling transfer were set up years ago, and the reason those transfers are in place is those take the place, if there's a profit turn, of the years in the past where those funds have run a negative and the city's general fund has had to make that money up. So it's what they're doing is those two funds are paying, it's the risk the city takes of running an enterprise fund is made up if there's a profit turned in those two funds, that's paid back to the general fund. And then the final operating transfer is the water reserve investment money, where we had talked about when we got the $96 million from the lease prepayment. If we invest that money in, in a balanced portfolio account, and we make X amount of dollars in interest over the next, not X years, 20 years, which coincides with our debt payments, we'll be able to take $6.3 million per year out of that water reserve investment account and move it back into the general fund. Now, the one thing to remember is that $6.3 million is in effect taking the place of the line item right above it, the $3.8 million we would normally get. And 3 years from now, that $3.8 million would have been $4 million. And 5 years after that, that $4 million would have been $4.2 million. So it's a very, very, very good thing that if we're able to invest that money in a balanced portfolio, like council and the mayor have proposed, but we need to remember that is taking the place of the 3.8, 4 million, $4.2 million. So I think somebody had asked me about the difference between those two. It's a difference. It's a revenue difference of positive $2,520,000 this year. So we just need to keep in mind that if we wouldn't have done the lease prepayment, the water authority would still be giving us $3.8 million every year.
Paul, can that number fluctuate naturally?
Well,
and how many years do you think that number could be in play, I guess?
Well, that 6.320 number would be in play if we put the money into a balanced portfolio and we earned an average over the next 20 years of 5%. And as you've sat in on the water reserve meetings and listened to that, 5% is a pretty conservative number on what we're going to be able to earn. I mean, water reserve makes more than 5% every year. So that's a pretty conservative number. Somewhere in the future, in year 15, 17, 20 or so, there could be more that we'd be able to take out than 6.320 amounts of dollars.
But with that being said, if we're paying down some of that debt, could that number change lower?
Well, it could change
because there isn't a.
If we take more out.
Okay.
If we take more out throughout the 20 years than 6.32, or if we earn, I mean, only because Teresa's going to, back me up that historically we've averaged more than 5%. So I'm going to say we're going to make more than 5% if we invested in a balanced portfolio. If we take out $10 million, to answer your question in a roundabout way, if we take out $10 million out of that investment account the first 5 years, well, yeah, that's going to eat into the principal, and that then in the end that would not allow us to take that money out. But the converse to that, if we only took out $4 million the first 5 years, well, then that would leave a lot more principal in there. And if we earn the 5%, that would leave a lot more for us to take out way down the line. Did I answer your question, or did I talk
in so many different ways? But yeah, it's good. It's still good. You got to start with a number somewhere. I'm getting
So
that.
the
I
number
just don't know.
Yeah, the number we're starting with is 5% earnings over 20 years average, taking out $6.32 million for those 20 years will leave us with nothing at the end. But that also coincides with when the debt payments that we have are done.
Okay.
Paul, I think that I think it was at our regular city council meeting, somebody had asked about not investing in fossil fuels. And I think that the mayor said that they were looking at that. So investing that money, are there any principles or guidelines in terms of how that fund is going to be invested?
I think, Liz, that's going to be, the mayor along with city council will make that decision. We did talk to the group that is our investment advisor for both the water reserve and our pension fund. We have spoken to them about putting this together. As Council President Winarski and the mayor talked about this balanced portfolio idea, we had talked to Seth from DeHob about this. And just last week, we mentioned that somebody was looking at, what kind of things could we invest in? And specifically, I wasn't on that meeting at the moment that somebody talked about that, but we did talk to Seth about, alternative energy, anything. I guess council's going to, as with the water reserve itself, council lays out the rules for that. The mayor along with council can lay out the rules for how this, as I'm calling it here, line item 3927, the water reserve investment account, how do you want to invest it?
Okay, thanks, Paul.
Okay, so in general fund revenues, let me finish the sewer and refuse and we can go back with any questions, okay? Okay, so let's go to page 73 in the budget book. That's our sewer fund revenues. And going down line item by line item, the first line item are permits. And that permit number is used. We collect permits from trash haulers and people that use the sanitary system. And normally I can't tell you that every year there's going to be these 17 haulers are going to show up, or I'm sure there's more, but we normally collect in the neighborhood of $65,000. The state aid pension number we budgeted based on what we collected this year and what we're assuming to collect next year. The city sewer charges, there's a slight increase there, as we had talked about when we presented the budget in our 5-year forecast, using the theory that we're going to increase the sewer collections each year. We bumped that up a couple percent, and then we took into account the fact that collections are not at the 98% they normally at. They're probably going to go down a little bit, or at least they have this year. They've gone down to 96% based on the COVID. So we
Paul,
yes.
just so for the record, with the increase, what's that charge the average homeowner?
We're looking at the average homeowner paying about $312 a quarter. Again, if usage is the same.
So what increase is that, I guess?
Little over 2
on the average.
Little over 2% for the average. A single family or single person, a lot less. Somebody like my wife and 2 kids and myself that run the washer every day and the dishwasher a lot more. So the next line item is our suburban.
Paul, real quick, I'm sorry.
Okay.
When's the last time we increased those fees And what was that? Can you remember?
Last year, and David, it was a couple 4% last year.
Do you know before that, Paul? Just Paul.
I don't think, oh, okay, Jim?
Yeah. Do you know when before we did it, before 2019 was off?
It was 4 years before that, yes.
Okay, 2015. Okay.
Yeah, we were on a cycle of every 4 years. And then we were getting, 18, 19% increases through those years.
Paul, I'm gonna be a devil's advocate again. Does anybody care about a real budget? Take Santa Claus out of it. Take that 95 million and put it aside for a year. Let's find out where we really are. We have a water reserve amount of money that we can tap. There's got to be places that we can save. But I have a real problem during this COVID times where we are going to take, Santa just brought a bag of millions. So we're going to take this millions and we're going to look real good for a year or 2 years. And then we're going to get backslapped. In the back of the head, we won't even see it coming because Santa won't be there. So I very much would rather see a real budget with that money set aside.
Not in the picture.
Fund. Pardon me?
That money not in the equation of it.
Keep that money out of the equation. And as usual, Paul, you're the one who's got to get to work.
And what's our option, Paul?
Yeah. That's all I'm saying. On my way out, tell me that. But I'm just.
Well, Ed, to answer your question, if we're going to get off kilter with the sewer fund revenues, if you go back to the general fund, we would have normally received $3.8 million from the water, Erie Waterworks as their lease payment. We're budgeting 6.3 million. So the difference would be $2,520,000 that we would need to find to balance the general fund budget.
I thought we were giving that to Mr. Groner.
Well, that's not in the general fund budget. That's just coming out of the lease prepayment money.
Put it in general fund.
Well, then you're tapping into the Christmas present we got. Just saying. I mean, if you're.
All right. I'll go back to my
Chris.
statement. I wanted, with COVID, there's money coming probably from the state and from the feds, as well as the county sitting on some money. If we're going to sit here with 6 or 7 million that we are taking out of that 95, nobody's going to look at us and give us any help because they don't need to. Santa was here. That's my point. And I'm not talking about me. I had 4 boys and a girl. They're all, except for one, they're all out of town. And the one that is here is in Mill Creek. So, I don't have a dog in the race, but I do have 2 or 3 generations after this one that are going to be looking down at City Hall and wondering why we didn't do the right thing with that money. And
So Paul, this is Michael Keys. So I guess what Ed is asking is, one thing we haven't seen is any proposed cuts from the administration. And so I know we're at our initial phases of getting out information, but I think that that's what he's hinting around toward, that we're places that we can cut the budget, can save money from the general fund budget.
Well, as we go through the different departments, you'll be able to see where the spending is. But if you look at the spending patterns in history in the general fund, we have not raised any spending in many, in years to any considerable amount. And our costs are going up. So the electric company, the gas company, they're charging us more. We're paying more for gasoline. When the trucks break down, Napa is charging us more for auto parts.
Paul, I understand that. I also understand that folks on a fixed income are facing those same dilemmas, but they don't have anybody to go to get taxes from. I was late for the meeting today because I was dumb enough to take a couple more calls from folks that don't want sewer and garbage on again. I'm just, I don't know, maybe I'm talking for the little guy, but I'm also talking for the future. That's why I'd like to see a real budget. I don't want a dog and pony show. I know the vast majority of you folks really work hard. I'm just saying, let's get on the same page, see what we're really up against, and then we can move forward. David had a good idea about not filling any retired jobs, right?
Yeah.
David, did you bring that up?
Yeah, my thought was, we hear about retirements all the time, and we have done some restructuring of different departments. What can we do? What can we do with less resources? And I know, there's a lot of discussion on, we need to continue services, and of course that's important. We need to do that. But is there any way to restructure departments and to do continue service with less? Again, I kind of compare it to different businesses. If there's only so much income in, you do what you can. I do know we have to continue to serve our citizens. They're paying taxes and so forth. We're just asking a really serious discussion about how we could what we can do better.
Should be able to.
I'm going to second or third Ed and David's comments. Someone will speak up and say, well, we have these contractual obligations. If you look at what the consumer price index has been compared to the raises that we've had for the last 5 or 6 years, those raises are always above the consumer price index. Since COVID started, I see a street sweeper coming down my street at least once a week, sometimes more often. Never used to happen before. I am, as we know from the story that Kevin Flowers wrote in the Sunday paper, other municipalities and governmental units recognized early on that COVID was going to be a problem, and they took action. We didn't. That's just unacceptable. And even without COVID, we have that money from the water, which is going to be used to prop up the budget, to fill the hole for this year, to fix it for the next 2 years. Beyond that, we still have, we're still facing deficits. And that's way before any of those LERTA properties that have been so highly touted will or might come on the tax rolls. So we need, we're always talking about people having personal responsibility. We need to have institutional responsibility here to not accept what's proposed as the final budget. And, I've been here now, this is the 3rd budget. We've gone through these ticky-tacky things, which no one even follows up on the ticky-tacky ideas we have. This year, we're serious about making sure that there's some type of way to address what is looming ahead of us. So you can do it, or we can do it, or we can do it together. I don't want to, we're going to start the rest of these budget sessions, and if it holds true to form as in years past, we're going to have department heads in front of us saying, well, this is why we have to do this. I would love to give an award or recognition to the one department head that comes in and says, you know what, I hear you. I'm going to go back and I'm going to come back with a new budget that is revised and saves money somewhere.
Beautiful.
Has anyone looked into early retirements like the school district does?
I don't know if that's a question for you, Paul, or Paul?
To offer early retirements? Kath?
Yes, that's what she's,
There'd have to be some structure to it. You know, things like that can always be looked into.
The biggest item would probably be paying health insurance for the 15 years or whatever it would be for early retirement.
You're correct there, Ed, yes.
There may be someone out there, though, that is thinking of retirement, but is just sort of hanging in there to get the most bang out of their buck, what have you. And I don't know, just thinking about it.
Well, if council would like to talk to our actuary about running a study along those lines, we can always do that. You know, assumptions will have to be made and new amounts or no hires or new hires. So yeah, that can be looked into.
We have to know how many people are in that realm for early retirement to see if it's even worth going through all the study. You know, you might have 10 people.
good point.
So we will see a real budget at our next session. Mr. Paul?
Well, I think, Ed, I'm gonna say that right now, the revenues and expenditures in this budget are absolutely real. They're all based on historical spending, historical needs of the departments.
No, I'm not accusing you of anything that way. I'm just saying, don't use the water money. Keep that water money by itself.
Well, again, if we don't use the water money, we need to find $2.5 million in the general fund.
Water reserve?
The water reserve could always be used. If 6
Okay.
of the 7 council members would like to take that money out of there. Now, again, remembering if we take money out of the water reserve, we're taking money away from our capital spending budget.
What do we have in our water reserve at this time, Paul?
12.8, $13 million. Teresa might have the exact number. I don't have it.
My point is that it'll get us to ground zero where we are. And I think I've heard just about everybody say it well, especially Liz, about being serious about what we're looking at and making sure that we know what floor we're on and which way we can go. Playing around with that water money is something that really hurts me. I don't like the idea of it at all. I'm sorry. If nothing else, if we put that 95 million in a good account with professionals from Morgan Stanley or wherever.
Well, I think the gentleman that is running it from DeHaab right now is a true professional, as you can look at what our returns have been from the water reserve and the pension funds the last, umpteen years.
Super. So I'm saying we would make that money up in a year. So when we look at the budget next year, at least we'll know where we're coming from instead of throwing money at it and hoping that we're going to find money next time to do it again. We'll know that we have the money there.
And next year, we could possibly replace the money we use out of water reserve if we, I guess, do our due diligence and not rush into what we do with the 95 million.
Yep. Thank you.
I'm just asking if that's.
I get, to answer the question, if what council's proposing is taking $2.5 million out of the water reserve fund to balance the budget, if you get the supermajority vote to do that, you could do that, remembering 4% of $2.5 million is $100,000 less in the capital budget that we're going to need, which is basically 2 police cars. Because the capital budget is where we pay for the police cars. It's where we pay for the heating system in City Hall. It's where we pay for, well, Jim,
I'm just saying what heat, but that's okay.
It's gonna get fixed. It's where we pay for the computer system. It's where we pay for a multitude of capital items. So
Do any of the public works vehicles come into that?
yes, they do.
So, well, I know the question is not tapping it at all, but you know, if we did use the money from the sewer, from the water fund, the water reserve, you know, there's probably nothing that would preclude us from using a factor of 1% of the water sale money, prepaid lease money, for capital expenditures. And because of the amount of money and the amount of possible return, it would actually double our possible capital projects fund. Just an idea that I'm throwing out, that if we had the 96 million and did 1%, that would be roughly $700,000, $800,000 that we could use for capital projects.
Well, okay, Michael, that could very well be done. So taking the excess of the 2.5, the difference between the 6.3 and the 3.8 million we would have normally got, you know, that's going to cost us some money, correct? But then we still
We'll make money on 95 million, Paul.
No, Ed, wait. We still did the lease prepayment, so we're missing the $3.8 million we would have normally got.
Understandable.
So it's the difference between what we're proposing, taking 3.2 out at an investment rate of 5% for the next 20 years, and the 3.8, because we're not getting the 3.8 anymore. Mr. Wojtek and the Water Authority are not going to write us a check for 3.8 million. So as you're asking about a real budget, by not using that 6.3 this year, we're $6.3 million short. So, you know, we took the money, we took the deal. So now we have to use that money from the deal intelligently, smartly, but we took the money. So now we
got to use it.
We got to use the money. And if you don't want to use the money, then you're going to say we got to make up the 3.8 we should have got, plus the money we would have earned from investment. Unless you don't want to say we wouldn't have, if you would have taken the 3.8 and thrown it away. Now you're $6 million short in the budget. So
we might become eligible for COVID money from the state and the feds too.
For Act 47.
If we get it in the right place.
So
yeah, so understanding all that, Paul, that, you know, what we were proposing was not to not use the money for paying down the debt.
Okay.
We know, you know, the first balloon payment isn't due for another year and a half. So
we have a debt payment. We have debt payments due in 2021.
Right, but they're smaller than the.
Well, yeah, they're $4.7 million. We have $4.5 million of debt payments due next year.
Okay. So we weren't saying not use the money to pay down the debt. That's not what we were saying.
Okay.
So we were just saying that to pay the deficit on the current, use the water reserve so that we can have a clear picture of the future. That's what we were saying, and how everything, so we're not backfilling, we're looking forward.
Well said.
What about if we don't give as much money to Chris Groner's department?
That's not budgeted in that's not budgeted in, that's not in this book. It's not budgeted. It's
Right.
money that's coming through as an ordinance, actually, first reading Wednesday night. That's just coming from the cash, from the bank account, from the $95 million we received, not budgeted.
Are we giving $100,000 grant to the thing?
500.
500,000.
I think Chris talked to all of you about that. I think he'd speak much more eloquently about that than I would.
Okay.
And I did talk to him, and he does have good purposes for it. It's not like it's, being blown up into the air as a firework or anything.
Oh, I'm sure that's true. But tell the
I
people
just
that
wanna
are
get
going to pay
back-
for certain waters.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I just
I'm
want to
sorry.
get back to, am I reading page 95 correctly in the budget? That when we're looking at 20, 23, 24, and 25, we have projected deficits at 26. Right now, we're looking at projected deficits going
Big ones.
forward. Am I right?
Big
Correct.
ones. Yep.
Okay, I just want people to be aware of that because that's, at that point, we're supposed to stop patching it with the water money. And the assumption is, I guess, that we're going to have more revenues, but how realistic is that? And I have another question, which might be, I don't know if this is related or not, but on page 5 of the workbook, where City of Erie cash versus, I think it's general financial accounting methods, that GFOA, I don't really know what that acronym stands for.
Government Finance Officers Association.
Okay, but that, again, I'm no expert on this, but that didn't look like a good line to me where it shows that, like, we're dropping off there. Is that something to be concerned about in terms of, what we have at our fingertips?
Well,
Or maybe you can just tell us what that means.
GFOA is like in the banking world where they tell you should have 6 months of cash in your checking account. GFOA says you should have 2 months of cash in your checking account. And we've been a little short on that the last few years.
And what would that mean going forward? What does that affect?
So that would affect if you get to January or February before our annual real estate tax collections come in, it's possible if we had real bad January and February collections on just normal revenues, that we could have a cash flow problem.
Okay, thank you.
But we never have, not since I've been here.
Thank you, Paul. So I guess one more time, with this year's shortfall and next year's deficit that's facing us, what's the bottom line? Including not having the money from the water authority, the 3.8 million.
Well, this year's shortfall, again, if you want to look at as Liz referenced, page 95, we're planning on using $2,009,000 this year to balance the budget, and we would need $6.7 million next year, if all revenues and expenses hold true to form. That's not saying that some of the building that's going to go on is not going to bring new jobs into Erie. It's not saying that, Chris, as you mentioned, Chris Groner, if he gives out some loans, there's not going to be new jobs that are made because of those new jobs. There's going to be more income taxes that we're going to collect. These pro forma numbers are based on where we're at right now, if everything holds true to form.
Paul, I want to apologize. I don't mean to be roasting you. You know I love you.
Well, I will say this, I've put my heart and soul into this budget for 15 years.
I know that.
And we've had 12 of the last 14 years have been positive returns. The first year I was here was a negative, but I inherited, and Ron Komorek was here at that point in time also.
Right.
We inherited a budget that was made for us wasn't made by us. And then a couple years ago, we had a bad year due to some collection problems, and we had a little bit of a negative. So, Ed, I accept, and I'm not. It is what it is. I understand.
It's not
your
personal.
job. Hey, look, I go to Wegmans on Saturday morning, and nobody complains to me about the budget. And I understand you 7 people do, and the mayor and the controller and the treasurer. People complain to you. You're public faces. You're the people that are in charge. You're going to be judged. I'm not. Nobody knows who I am. But I will say this, that the numbers here have been based on accurate numbers of what has been done in the past, how it's been done in the past, and what we feel that we need to have to run this business. And I'll call it a business here. Run this business and give the citizens of Erie the services that they've grown accustomed to.
Exactly, but the fact remains that we're spending more than we're bringing in. At
this point in time, we are, and the mayor is working on that night and day to try to bring those two numbers together. As he's talked to you about what PFM called the three-headed dragon, the pension, the debt, and the structural deficit, right. We're trying to bring that structural deficit together.
I think we're all on the same page with that.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, I think we are.
Yeah. Just want you to know I love you, man.
Thank you. Do you want to, we'll finish the sewer revenue because we're coming up to Jimmy's favorite line item next. 3442, which is the suburban sewer charges. As we all remember, the suburban municipalities are charged for what their flow percentage is of our expenses. So their flows have gone up, our expenses have gone up. So we're budgeting and not budgeting. There's an actual spreadsheet that Jim Gorski put together 20 years ago that is been in effect that we still use, and the townships all go along with it. Their flow's gone up, our expenses are gone up. So we're going to get about $1 million more from them this year. So that's a good thing. The water authority charges, that's based on their usage of what sludge they send from their plant back to us. Industrial surcharges down a little bit because there's been some manufacturing that's been down this year. And then the last few penalties are penalties on late payments of bills. Investment income is your checking account. Interest. And then the last line item, the operating transfer from refuse and recycling. Refuse and recycling, the next fund we'll talk about, makes a transfer from their fund into the sewer fund in order to pay the water authority for the billing fee. So that went up a little bit this year because of the new agreement we have with the water authority on their billing fee.
Lease agreement with the agreement we made.
It's part of that, yeah. And then the next page I want to talk about is page 81, which is the revenues from the refuse and recycling fund. The very first line item is the appropriation of the state aid. And then the line item after that is the city sewer charges, or refuse charges, sorry. And we're proposing about a 3.5% increase there. And as we all talked about, and I know we can get back to this in a second, but we all talked about this, and at the time 2 years ago, we talked about this. Everyone was on board with small incremental increases each year, as opposed to one large, again, 17, 18, 19% increase every 4 years in these billings to our citizens. So
What's that equal dollar per quarter? Dollar amount?
$68 or $67.80. 68 bucks.
Per year?
No, per quarter.
Okay, but what's the increase amount?
271 per year it is.
Okay.
Am I getting what you're asking right?
No, I still want to know what the increase is. You said 3.5%. What's that equal in dollars?
$10 a year.
$10 a year.
We're
Okay.
paying 261 right now. We're going to 271.
Okay.
Is
And
that
I know we had mentioned in the past smaller increments,
correct?
but once again, we were in a different type of year this year where I don't care, between the sewer rate increase and the garbage fee increase. I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but principle of it is it's another increase for our taxpayers. That's all.
I think I missed something there. So how much is the sewer going up? And how much, well, I know that would be a percentage, but then how much is the refuse going up? Because that should be a fixed amount.
The refuse is going up $10.
Okay, so we would expect our refuse to go up $10 every year in the foreseeable future?
Well, we're looking at 3% increases, yes.
To 10 a quarter?
No,
No,
10
actually,
for the year.
10 for the year?
$2.50,
Yeah.
$2.50 a quarter.
All right. Okay, thank you.
That's what refuse is, $2.50.
Right, yeah, right, yes, correct.
And what would
And
be
so
an,
I have a question. How much revenue does the department generate above its operating cost?
The sewer and refuse department,
Yes.
if they both run true to the budget, they both have an excess of that $1.1 million that we then transfer back to the general fund. That's that last couple line items we talked about, the transfers.
page 81?
Refuse and sewer back to the general fund. So if we take those transfers out, then we have to make that money up back in the general fund.
It was actually page 17.
Right. No, I understand that, but I'm just saying, I think that $10 a year is a lot. You know, to be expected year over year over year over year, that just like everything else, eventually the price of the goods may be higher than the price of the service. So.
And
Paul, has there been any talk about the glass recycling yet? I know our church asks for any bottles that we have to be brought to them because they're selling it off to somebody.
Ed, I don't know that answer. I guess when Dave Mulvihill comes on Thursday night, we can talk to him
Find
about
that
that.
out.
Yeah,
Okay.
because I know one of the things somebody brought up last year was about selling all the compost down at wastewater, and we've always had a problem with that. And I don't want to talk. Well, it could be part of the refuse budget if we actually make any money doing it. but we've always had a problem that our compost was not really clean because, you know, there's
It's as is,
yeah, there's some garbage, but we've done a lot of work in the last
Make
5
it better.
years to clean that up down there. So we're going to try wholesaling compost to Gerlach's and, you know, some of the
Yeah.
other lawn care services this year.
Fantastic.
I don't know if it's going to work. It might, you know, we might make
Instead of them-
$10,000. We might make nothing instead of giving it away for free. Yes.
instead of them going to the parks and grabbing all of it before our citizens get
Yeah,
there.
correct. So I
Just saying.
Yeah. So the average citizen in the sewer fund is going to pay about 3.2% more. The average citizen in the refuse fund is going to pay about 3.8% more. And then remembering that with the sewer and refuse, because they're enterprise funds, which are service driven, that as somebody mentioned, the nonprofits are going to pay for those. Everybody that uses those services are going to pay for those along with, you know, along with me, who's a taxpayer and a homeowner.
Super.
Back to the refuse revenues, line item 3520, which is our penalties, which is based on what we've historically collected along the lines of those penalties. And then the investment income is what the checking account interest has been. Moving backward, next fund, golf fund, page 85. We kind of based next year's revenues on what had been done in the past. As the National Golf Foundation said, due to COVID, you know, our revenues were through the roof this year. We had a tremendous year, but National Golf Foundation said for the months of June, July, and August, golf was up about 17%. So we pulled back those numbers equal to where they would have been in other years.
Paul, you know, if a senior citizen bought a summer pass at J.C. Martin, they got a break. But a senior walking up to golf, you know, once or twice a year, whatever they do,
Paid the same rate.
they paid full
Yeah.
boat. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just talking to some older folks.
Okay,
I
we can
know.
look at it. We can look into that. Well, if you go to Downing and play and you rent a cart, seniors are given a discount.
Right.
As opposed to if I go out there, I pay full rate and the senior would get a cut rate. So
Right.
The other couple departments I wanted to talk to before we open this up for you know, whatever conversation is page 89, the capital improvement fund. And as Michael, you had mentioned, maybe taking money out of the water reserve or whatever, wherever we go, remembering this capital fund is I hate to use the word funded. The capital fund is funded by 4% of the balance of the water reserve money each year. So that's about $500,000 this year. So any monies we take out of water reserve will harm the ability of the city, of us, to be able to make capital purchases. The next page, page 90, the risk management fund revenues are all based on what each department owes, based on be it property casualty insurance, workers' comp insurance, our health and health plans. And then the final, the debt service, and the debt service budget right now is based on using the water reserve fund to give us an interest income revenue, and then we'll use that to pay off the current bond schedule. So we took the money out of sewer and general fund based on what their proportion is of the bonds. And normally the debt service that we owe right now is about 85% general fund and 15% sewer fund. So I've hit all the revenues for tonight. Questions?
Will we be able to see the budget I asked you about?
And as I'm saying, at where we're sitting right now, if we take that water reserve money out of the budget, the revenue budget, we're going to be about 2.52 million short from the water reserve income and 3.8 short on the money that we took as the lease prepayment. So we're going to need to make up about $6.3 million in the general fund somehow.
Okay.
And to take 6 million out of water reserve isn't an answer.
No, that's,
To be-
I mean, and maybe
No.
because I've always handled the capital fund, I mean, cutting that, you're taking half the money out of the water reserve. Instead of having a capital budget of $520,000, we'd have a capital budget of $260,000, which we
Isn't going to work either.
no, we spend more than that. You know, every year we're buying 3 or 4 police cars just because of the huge turnover in those things. And there's a handout in here that shows what a police car is worth nowadays. I mean, they're worth a lot of money. You know, just $30,000 plus the MDTs and I mean,
Everything else, yeah.
is 55, 60 grand. So we buy 4 police cars and we're at $250,000. Now we haven't been able to buy any equipment for Chief Walco. We haven't been able to buy anything
Fire
for
truck.
for public works. It would be detrimental to the budget.
You try to do it with as little as you can take.
Understand?
Michael, you have anything?
No, I just,
Oh, I have a question. Yeah, I know we ask a lot of questions that are, there's no real easy answer to them. But is there any creative ideas that are other cities are doing to really deal with their biggest costs, which of course are salaries and rising salaries when we have income is not keeping up with that. Yeah, I know it's an open question. I know you're not going to say yes, this is it, but just take a look for some creative answers or ideas.
You know, as you look through this budget handout book, you look at page 94, which has the revenues of all the other third-class cities. We do our best
on Saturdays, college.
to whatever revenues everybody else is charging. We do our best to try to fall in line with what those are. You know, and then the last page or the page before that is the page that shows on page 95, and I'll read, a lot of the other revenues collected by third-class cities that we don't charge. Business privilege tax. Can't charge that because of a state law back in the late 90s. We can't charge, we don't have a casino. I mean, 3 of the cities are getting big dollars from casinos. We've looked into, if you look at that list, we've looked into each of those to see where, is there somewhere we could grab $3 or $4 million that makes sense to do?
And really the trick that I think a lot of council members are asking is what can we do to relieve taxpayers so that we could share the load with a lot of people who work in our city and a lot of businesses who want to be in our city. And again, it's tough to balance that. I know, we're always looking to do the impossible, but that's the situation we're in, and we have to do something. We all know we can't dig the hole. We need to come out of it.
Yeah, David, I agree. That was well said. For the dollar amounts that we need at this point in time, if when we go through the department budgets, you want to beat me up over $1,000 here or add $2,000 there, this budget's a pretty strong budget. I mean, to get $2 million to not use that fund balance is I mean, there's no revenue that, you know, do you want to add a $500,000 tax? I mean, we can't, dog licenses, we can't times those by 1,000. You know what I mean? And I know that's a silly one to say, but you know.
Well, you know, folks on a fixed income would rather have a tax increase than a garbage and sewer increase, because at least that's over a year. You know, I told you some of the folks that have gardens, they pay more for sewer for those 3 or 4 months in the summer than they do for the other 8 or 9 when they're not using the water to sprinkle their gardens.
I think also that what I want to make clear is that I am not asking you to find more revenue to raise more fees. I am asking you to come back with some cuts. I have been on council. This is the 3rd time. I have yet to see you come in, other than you go and you do some accounting cuts. You never come in and say, you know what, we hear you. We can't just keep looking for more ways to squeeze money. I don't understand. You have all those examples in there of we don't have this and we don't have that, but we know from that story yesterday that other municipalities took action when COVID hit. They did furloughs. If you had done furloughs when people could have gotten the additional money from the federal government, then I would say somebody was forward looking. This is disappointing. And I am not voting for this budget. I will tell you right now, I am not voting for this.
Paul?
Yes.
Question. Are we farther ahead or farther behind using the water lease money to balance this year shortfall and balance next year's budget, or taking money out of the water reserves? It's going to come down. We almost have 2 options, correct?
They're both going to be invested. I mean, hypothetically, they're both invested in a 60-40 balanced portfolio. They should both give us the same return of money. Taking money out of the water reserve fund then takes away from our ability to use that money for capital. Taking the money out of the water investment fund allows us to use some of that money further out into the future.
If we don't have the money, we shouldn't spend it.
Well, that's a different story. That's on a different day.
I missed what Ed was going to say. He was muted.
Yeah.
I said, if we don't have the money, we shouldn't spend it. Dave, you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm not trying to be facetious, but
Thank you.
it's true. You know, you got $10 in your pocket, you're not going to buy a $20 whatever. And we've been doing that way too often, I'm afraid. Not your fault, Paul. It's been going on for too long of a time.
Is there anything else this evening anybody wants to ask Paul?
Paul, what were the management increase of salary for this year? What percentage?
1%.
Thank
What's
you.
that equal? Dollar-wise.
You'll see all the percentages on page 3 of your handout book.
I saw the increase there. I, like Liz had mentioned, is it too much? Is it too little? Is it just right?
I'm sorry, Kath, is what too much or too little?
The increase.
Well, on that page, on page 3, the first 4 increases are contractual. The next, the last one, the non-union, the 1%, as Liz mentioned, the consumer price index, the consumer price index the last 4 years, you'll see on page 4, the increases have been 1.3%, 1.6%, 2.8%, 2.0%, 0.3%. So I went back 5 years. So that 1% over the average of the last 5 years, the 1% the management non-bargaining is getting is less than what the consumer price index average has been the last 5 years.
Thank you.
Anything else, council? Paul, I'm sure we'll be into further discussions, but
well, we're going to be together Wednesday at 6. We're going to do police and fire. 6 to 6:30, 6:30 to 7. Then you have agenda from 7 to 7:30. And then Thursday night, Mr. Mulvihill and Mr. Zisk are going to come in, and we're going to talk about public works expenditures.
okay, great.
And again,
thank you very much.
So I'm not such a great typer. If anybody has anything they want, send me an email, call my cell phone. Liz, you got that revenue thing today? So, I mean, if you want anything, so instead of my third email, anything you want, I know a few of you have called me, call me up and I'll be glad to answer your questions.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul, Lisa, Chris, and your finance team. Thank you.
Have a good night. Thank you.